Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you listening on the Life Online Radio Network, we wish to welcome you in. For those of you listening to us on YouTube, we welcome you in. Special thanks to our sponsor, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. That's Affinity WES. You can reach them on both Facebook and Twitter. And if you do anything with words, they will be happy to take a look. They have an expert staff that's willing to go over every single word that you have written to make it the best it can be. As we're getting closer to Halloween, I thought we'd have a little bit of a fun show today. I'm not sure if it's going to be a long one, but it'll be a bit of fun. Because last week we went over ghosts and spectral encounters. But that's not the only thing that goes bump in the night. Indeed, there's creatures all over the world. They're called cryptids because they don't quite match what we expect in creatures. There's an entire field of cryptozoology, and quite honestly, it has pulled off surprising results in the past. I would call it an actual science because there's a certain genus of animals called Lazarus taxi, or animals that have come back from the dead. The famous example would be the coelacanth. It was believed to have been extinct for tens, if not hundreds of millions of years, and yet they've found populations of it all over the world. There's other examples. There's a deer in Vietnam, but these are fairly substantially sized animals. They're not dwarfs, they're not insects or something like that, and they've managed to survive for millions of years without humans noticing, despite the fact there's 7 billion of us on the planet. Despite the fact that we've expanded virtually everywhere we can, there are still wastelands. Not only just the desert, but also there's tropical forests where people have never been. There are the wide ocean. We have no idea what's down there. The feeding habits of the sleeper shark, for example, are completely unknown to us because we only discovered it a couple decades ago, and we just simply haven't had enough time, interest, and money to go searching for it. Once again, though, that's all in cryptozoology. Crypto meaning hidden, zoology meaning animals. Possibly the biggest animal that would be considered cryptozoology would be the Loch Ness Monster. This thing is pretty much universally famous. Up in Scotland, in Loch Ness, which is a relatively small body of water, smaller than the Great Lakes, bigger than your average river, there's supposedly this monster that comes up and appears every so often. There's legends dating back to the 13th and 14th century of this thing apparently coming on shore on land to threaten people. But I'm not 100% confident on those ones. When you look back into ancient legends, unfortunately people do confuse fairy tales with fact. It would have been a very, very effective tool for them to say, oh, there's this creature that comes out of the lake and grabs you and drags you in. Yes, that is a very common legend throughout Europe and probably throughout Asia. Generally, it's females that drag men into the river to punish them for various misdeeds, but the monster itself substitutes in quite nicely. It's just an archetype. The legend can put anything in there, be it a child, a monster, a woman, whatever you might have it. The only problem we have with this is the evidence is extremely sketchy. First of all, it's doubtful any large creature would be able to live in the loch because it's a very deep and cold place. All the life tends to hang out near the surface. There's not a lot going on in its depths. It's not like the ocean where even in the depths there's a whole lot of stuff. Loch Ness is from a point of view of living things, Loch Ness is shallow. And so a giant creature that was going around and eating just simply wouldn't have the fish to keep itself going. So in fact, that might prove the legend right, because it would have to come on land, much like a crocodile does, in order to feed on things. But the problem is, it wouldn't be able to do it very often, otherwise it would have been seen. Loch Ness is not a complete wasteland. It's not highly populated. It's somewhere in between. So the places it would be able to go would pretty much all be explored, since the people around Loch Ness are also interested in going fishing, going sightseeing, all the normal things that you and I do, because they're people. And the photograph from the 1930s has since been proven to be a fake. Whether it was a deathbed confession or some new cryptoanalysis, I'm not 100% sure, but that famous photo of it, unfortunately, has been dismissed as a fake. So the Loch Ness Monster, unfortunately, we're going to have to regard as simply dubious, highly unlikely. Not completely. I'm never one to completely rule anything out. It's just that I don't think it's very likely. Keeping with our water theme, there's also sea serpents. Now this is kind of the direct opposite of the Loch Ness Monster. Sea serpents could very well be living out there, be gigantic, and feed on boats just like they're supposed to in legend. Again, the deep sea part of the ocean, the abyssosphere as it's sometimes called, is a wondrous place. Lots of strange things happen there that we barely get a chance to witness. It's only in the past decade we confirmed the existence of the giant squid. And this thing was rumored for decades and decades. Legends were told about giant squids coming up from the bottom. But nobody had proof of them until very recently. We've had mysterious skeletons washing up. We've had all sorts of things, but since squid don't leave skeletons, they kind of leave a blob, it was very difficult to do anything about that evidence. It was just a blob. Something, maybe it was a jellyfish. Maybe all sorts of crazy things could happen. Not till we actually had DNA testing were we able to say, yes, this is a giant squid, just like the legends say, the Kraken, and it is a real thing. In my humble opinion, sea serpents are the exact same thing. Regular snakes that go through the water, that live in the water full time, let me qualify that, they are quite adaptable. And they're not everywhere you look. There's hundreds of them. They're good predators. They have a good solid niche, but same token, you don't really see them when you look. You kind of run across them. Now, these are very dangerous animals that have incredible venom, and basically, in their niche, they're the apex predators. There are bigger animals than them that can take them out, but for their size and weight, snakes fill a very valuable role. So, in a place like the ocean, where things getting gigantic is not unheard of, this is a very big possibility. Look at whales. Whales go anywhere from the size of a dog straight up to a blue whale, which is the biggest creature on Earth. So why would we assume that in an environment like the ocean, which actually helps support your body weight instead of being on land, a snake or a serpent could grow to a gigantic size, just like the octopus could? So, unlike the Loch Ness Monster, I'm willing to take this one under advisement and say, maybe. I wouldn't be shocked if they dredged it out of the ocean tomorrow and said, look at this giant thing. On the other hand, I'm not holding my breath. But sea serpents would have access to all the food they need, from plankton to fish to even seagulls and mammals like that, because snakes are known to be able to take down fish or birds. Snakes are known to be able to eat virtually anything. So, unlike the Loch Ness Monster, sea serpents are a viable alternative. Keeping with the creepy theme, there's also rumors of giant spiders. Yes, it's Halloween. You knew I wouldn't be able to leave a giant spider alone. What I find interesting about the giant spider is exactly how far across the world it appears. It's in South America, Africa, Vietnam, Louisiana. All these places have rumors of giant spiders. And again, this is on the borderline of plausibility. The first thing is we know spiders can get humongous. And the reason we know this is the fossil record. The first spiders that came out on land were huge. Absolutely huge. And they were apex predators in their day. They were big, they were strong, they could take anything down with their bite and their venom. They're a well-adapted predator whose been around for hundreds of millions of years. So, would there be a giant spider? In Louisiana? Maybe. The swamps are a good place for a spider to hang out. Vietnam? Maybe. The tropical forest there is a good place to hang out. Africa? Maybe. There's a lot of spots in Central Africa a giant spider could live very happily. But the question is, how likely is it? The problem that spiders have is the amount of oxygen in the air. Despite what global warming theorists would tell you, there's less carbon in the air now than there was 200 million years ago. There's also less oxygen. Now, this has nothing to do with humans. This is a natural cycle. I'm not denying the fact that we need to clean up the planet, because Lord knows we do. Make no mistake. I insist on cleaning up the planet. I just want to do it for selfish reasons. Humans need to take care of our own garden. I mean, you wouldn't poop in your backyard, so you would take care of it. We need to do the same with the garden that we were given in Earth. Back into history, though, when humans weren't around, the genus Homo wasn't around, even the great apes weren't around, nor were our precursors. The giant spiders were very much a thing, because there was more oxygen, and spiders and insects are able to grow bigger when there's more oxygen. So you can in fact thank the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you can thank the lack of oxygen in the atmosphere for not having dragonflies stealing babies, not having spiders taking your dog. And even today, the tarantula grows pretty big. And if you're on an expedition somewhere that's already spooky, the forests of Louisiana, the jungles of Vietnam, places like this where you're naturally on edge, yes, a little spider, even just a little bit bigger than a tarantula, could probably scare the bejesus out of you. And I wouldn't blame you. Of course, people's memories do get warped over time, so that hand-sized spider that jumped out at you suddenly becomes a giant big thing coming at you. This has happened within our lifetimes. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter reported he was attacked by a giant swimming rabbit, which he fought off with an oar in his boat. I respect Jimmy Carter. I think he has done a lot of wonderful things, motivated by religion, but at the same token, whatever his motivation is, he's done a lot of good things. He had issues as a president, which all presidents do. Maybe that'll be an interesting topic to cover another day about what happened to Jimmy Carter. But for our experience here, we're concentrating on the giant swimming rabbit, which was widely reported in the tabloids at the time. And I'm not using tabloids in a derogatory means. I'm just saying tabloid newspaper. Go ahead, Google it. Jimmy Carter attacked by giant swimming rabbit, and you'll read the article. And while he calls it a giant swimming rabbit, like I said, memories tend to get distorted. He might have been a president, he might have been a war veteran, all sorts of things might happen. But when something as innocent as a rabbit attacks you, it inflates in your mind. Oh my goodness, this giant rabbit is coming after me, because rabbits can get pretty big. And that's one of the reasons that I believe giant spiders very much could exist. There's another interesting phenomenon that, again, is pretty much worldwide, but they're called phantom cats, ghost cats, mystery cats, black cats, whatever you want to name them. These things are all over the place. But it's the ones that appear in England that fascinate me the most. The reason is, in North America, we have panthers, we have jaguars. In Europe and Asia, they had lions up till a couple thousand years ago, which unfortunately were hunted by the Romans. They have cougars, cheetahs, all sorts of things. So the only place that doesn't really have big black cats is Britain. That's right. The United Kingdom, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Cornwall. There's no real big cats there. Well, none that are native. But at the same token, there's persistent sightings of them. And usually they're associated with a scream. There's something about British legends. They love things that scream. Like banshees scream in the middle of the night. And these cats show up and scream. It must be pretty terrifying to run into one of them, don't get me wrong, but that added to the fact that it's screaming. We all know a cat scream. And scale that up from little pussy that's hanging right on our feet to a giant thing that when it growls, it echoes the room. Yeah, that would be pretty scary, I would admit. The peculiar thing is, in England, they keep getting sightings at least once a year, probably more, of a big cat, usually prowling around at night, which is when cats naturally hunt, and it's a shock for the people that see it. Unlike the giant spiders, these people are adamant in how big the cats are. These are not just little pussy cats, wandering around lit wrong by the moon. These people are adamant that these are cougars, jaguars, panthers, some sort of big cat. England might actually have something here. Not just because they're English, but rather because over the centuries, people have kept exotic pets. And the British royal family, being one of the richest in the world by far, not only in terms of property, but in terms of real money, they've spent a lot of that money too. Thanks to being a colonial superpower, thanks to just having eccentric people at the top, the English people might really have a giant cat problem. See, the giant cats that we know of are very capable hunters. They're also very smart, and they know to keep away from humans. So naturally, prowling around at night, keeping away from humans, would be a logical strategy for these cats to adopt. It's right in their wheelhouse, it's something they're very good at, and they could be hiding out in sewers, in swamps, all sorts of places that humans don't normally go because they recognize, I don't smell the tracks of man here, I don't see them, this is my safe spot. England also has large preserves set aside for hunting. Yep, that's right, hunting. When you're an English subject, you notice I chose the word subject and not citizen, you do not really have rights the same way that people in the United States have it. Even in Canada, there's kind of a bit of a problem between us being a subject and us being a citizen. That'll be something for another show. But the lord or the lady or whoever it is that rules the land would have a certain area set aside for them. And that lord or lady, whoever it is, Viscount, Duchess, Earl, you name it, that property is exclusively for them. Anything on it is exclusively theirs. So let's pretend you're a young man in the 1940s, you're trying to trap a rabbit because it's the 1940s, the air raids are happening, and that rabbit represents supper for your family. As you're hunting it down, that rabbit crosses over that one little fence line. You can no longer touch it. It is now the property of the lord or lady of the mansion. They can go out anywhere they like, their property or anywhere else, shoot that same rabbit, whether it's on your property, whether it's on the street, but you cannot go onto their property because that's reserved for the nobility. And they're very particular with their charter rights. They have extensive rights saying all the fish in this area belong to me, all the creatures, etc., which is why if you read stuff from England, there's this whole idea of poaching that doesn't really exist in North America. For us, poaching is a guy who goes out and hunts too many moose. Well, that's a heck of a lot of work to do. I mean, first of all, hunting moose is not an easy task. Secondly, we have to go into really deep forests and go hunting along trails. Moose hunting is just, it's not in my wheelhouse, I'll be honest with you. But compare that with England, where there are specific preserves set aside where in the past, foxes for sure were let loose to run around to be able to be hunted. All sorts of things were set loose over time. So what's to say a couple of these cats didn't get away? Circuses lose cats all the time. And they would be able to form a substantial little breeding population. It wouldn't be large because there's not a lot of room for an extra predator in the English Isles. But the same token, I would have to put this in the possible category, in the very possible category. And it would possibly be the first man-introduced cryptid. Although maybe I'm giving them a bit too much credit there. At any rate, these things are shrouded in mystery because they're only seen at night. They're only seen when, the conditions are right. But think about it. Your house cat is pretty much the same way. If it doesn't want to be around you, it has places it can hide. Matter of fact, one of mine is hiding in the closet right now, and I didn't even realize before I started recording. Cats, like I said, are very clever, and just one or two getting loose could possibly put forth a whole population that was was taught to stay away from humans. There's the Jersey Devil, which of course is from the New Jersey area. And it was kind of a horse-shaped thing with a funny face and hooves. And this is a very interesting thing. It starts appearing in around the 1780s, and the last recorded appearance is 1909. Now, this thing is known for literally walking up the sides of houses. Of course, it spooks anybody it sees because, you see this crazy looking thing that's got wings and it's not the shape of anything that you've seen before. But its long history, like nearly 300 years worth of sightings, is worth considering. We haven't seen it in a long time, but that doesn't mean anything. There's tons of things humans haven't seen in a lot of time that still come back. Like I said earlier, with the Lazarus taxi, the animals that have come back from the dead. Even though they were never really dead, we just lost track of them. Jersey is an interesting place. I mean, even in the city, there would be places for it to hide, and in 1909, there simply wasn't the foot traffic that there is in the modern era that would have... in the modern era, its foot tracks would have been obscured. Even just people walking down paths, people just going about their business, the tracks would be gone in minutes. Whereas in 1909, when it was walking across farmland as opposed to city land, it would have absolutely been visible, and probably for quite some time, to say nothing of the 1700s. And of course, we can't finish this discussion. In fact, we can't even... There's no way we can avoid this part of the discussion. Whether you want to call it Bigfoot, whether you want to call it Sasquatch, whether you want to call it a Wowie Wowie, whether you want to call it Yeti. It's here. There's some sort of archetype in our mind that keeps coming up across the world. And it's of something near human, which I use in particular because it's not quite human when it's encountered. But it's near human. It's near enough to recognize that it's close enough to being what we are. But it's not quite like us. Whether you call it Bigfoot, whether you call it Yeti, whether you call it Sasquatch, it's basically a big, hairy, human-like animal that is only encountered in the strangest of places. Now again, this is one I have to put in the category of relatively likely. In the forests of North America, there are tons of places people don't go that a giant creature like that could easily survive. In Asia, once again, I have to say, the forests, the Himalayas, people can go days without seeing a track of another human being. So it's fully possible it could survive there. Australia with the Wowie Wowie, it's ignorant to say Australia doesn't have big forests, but the same token, this is the one I kind of draw the line at. I mean, in Malaysia and the Pacific Islands, most of them are, relatively speaking, tropical paradises. And New Guinea, for example, still has huge amounts of tropical forests that are undisturbed. But it's hard to think of them having a big enough breeding population in those areas. Whereas in Asia and North America, it's very easy to think of. There have been all kinds of places, of documentaries, of evidence about Bigfoot. There was the Bigfoot Hunters show, I believe it was, on TLC or Outdoor Life Network or whatever it was a couple of years ago. I found it was very heavily edited. Of course, as a TV producer, you're there to get ratings, because without ratings, you don't get advertising dollars. Without advertising dollars, you don't get paid. So I understand you gotta show the audience a little something, a little tease. And I remember there was this one part, and they were videotaping this one leaf shaking in the wind, and they were making this big deal out of it. And I was just like, come on, guys. Like, I can accept on a TV show if you go out looking for something and don't find it. I'm unfortunately old enough to remember when Geraldo Rivera broke down Al Capone's secret vault and found nothing. 3-hour show for nothing. Bigfoot hunters, ghost hunters, paranormal type places like that, I don't really have a problem if they don't find anything. As a matter of fact, I find it more interesting for them to show up with nothing. It would be interesting for them to have a scientist there who breaks it down and says, okay, well actually, this is a real story told by Tim Weisbach where he was doing a ghost hunt and he was up in the attic and he could hear voices. And for a couple minutes, he was really fascinated. There's these voices out there that I can hear, and they seem to come from all around me. Well, it turns out a tour group was going through the basement, and they were echoing up to where he was. And I like explanations like that. As much as I want him to see a ghost, as much as I want something peculiar to happen, I think it's equally as interesting when they can say, the tour group was down here and you can make the echo happen. That to me is a good show. It shows that they're covering all their bases. But back to Bigfoot hunters and their unfortunate editing. I hate to pick on editors. Editors are awesome. Affinity writing and editing services, I'm 100% behind them. But they can take what is 12, 24 hours of footage and cut it into something interesting because that's their job. At the same token, the Bigfoot hunters, the UFO hunters, all these places really must go through tons of film. I'm talking reels and reels, or whatever the new standard is. flash drives and flash drives. They just must go through tons of it and just have to boring conversations of, where do you want to get coffee from? Well, I like Dunkin' Donuts, but Tim Hortons is around the corner. Zip, you got to cut all that stuff out. Whether they're looking for Bigfoot, Godzilla, the Martians, whatever it may be, there's a ton of crap that just needs to be thrown out. And this is what brings us to the biggest piece of evidence for Bigfoot that has been put forward, and also one of the most controversial, if not the most controversial. And that is the Patterson-Gimlin film. For those of you who don't know what that is, you've seen it. It's that hazy little shot of this big creature in the distance, kind of doing a walk that's not quite like a human would walk, and it's honestly very mysterious. Go ahead, Google it, go on YouTube, Patterson-Gimlin. Gimlin is spelled Gimlin, just so you know. But this photo is very mysterious because this is being filmed in 1967. For the sake of comparison, in 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey was released. Now you look at the gorillas in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and while they had the best makeup experts, while they had the best acting coaches, they had a huge budget and everything on 2001, A Space Odyssey, you can still tell those monkeys or apes or whatever you want to call them are actors in costumes. They're doing a darn fine job of it. Don't get me wrong, they earn their pay, each and every one of them. But compare that to Patterson-Gimlin. Patterson was already a Bigfoot enthusiast. He had seen one back in 1962, and he was basically virtually penniless at this point. He had talked Gimlin into being part of this film project that they were working on together, some sort of basic cowboy western, and this thing was being done on a shoestring budget. I mean, the whole film, for actors and everything, in 1967, he had $700. I don't know exactly what that works out to in today's money, but I would say it works out to less than $2,000. So in that money, somewhere, you've got to get riders, you got to get horses, you've got to feed them all somehow, and you got to convince them that you're going out for a day or so. And indeed, most of the Patterson-Gimlin film is these horses going by, them trying to get atmosphere shots to establish what's going on. It's only 58 seconds of the film that Bigfoot appears. Now again, keep in mind, $700 is all these two have, and they've already had to hire people. Whether it was on a promise, a prayer, whatever it might be, they also have to get their camera, their film. This is real film we're talking. This isn't modern digital. This is proper film. The shot starts off relatively blurry, which is understandable because if you're surprised, again, this is my classic challenge. Go to a highway, go to an airport, whatever it is, have your camera phone in your pocket. And keep in mind, camera phones are dramatically quicker than the old film cameras. My dad has a Super 8 cranky one that you have, and I've played with it once or twice. It would be absolutely impossible to get any sort of decent image off of it quickly. But again, go to your highway, go to your plane, whatever it is, and either the first car, first plane, whatever it is, try to rip out your phone, open it, put your password in, and take a picture. And see how good that picture is going to be. Chances are, not very good. But I would always be interested in seeing them, so if you decide to do this experiment, please send all your photographs to silverlightservices@gmail.com. I would be interested to see the various results. Back to the Patterson-Gimlin experience. Patterson was kind of the lead man on this, and while he was an aspiring film artist, shall we say, he In the 1960s, there was a lot of things being shot that were not worth the celluloid that was used to make the film. Patterson was in pretty good shape. He played high school football, and Gimlin was the same way. They drove out in Gimlin's truck that was carrying all their provisions and 3 cameras. And Patterson, before they went out, actually said to Gimlin, "If we run across Bigfoot, I want your promise that you're not going to shoot it." Now, this initially sounds suspicious, but remember what I said before. Patterson had seen one of these things back in 1962. So in 1967, here he is riding along with a posse of cowboys stereotypically carry guns, and in the United States, even though it is the Washington area, I guarantee one of those fellows had some sort of gun on him. After all, you're going into the wilderness. It only makes sense to have something to defend yourself. So the promise doesn't seem as outrageous as it seems. Again, $700 to shoot this movie. So, the biggest criticism against the Bigfoot that they saw is the fact that Patterson was a film student. But like I said, in 2001 A Space Odyssey from Stanley Kubrick, that's being filmed about the same time, they have difficulty getting the actors to bumble around like apes do. Feel free to Google that as well. You can see it. The apes at the monolith. They look very much like humans that are trying to go on all fours and kind of crawl around. Whereas, whatever the creature is in the Patterson-Gimlin film, it moves in a much more organic fashion. It's definitely not walking like a human, but it is walking in a distinct style. There have been scientists who have analyzed it and have shown that a human can't possibly replicate the movements. And the most peculiar movement is when it looks at the camera. Now, a good director, if he was trying to make a proper nature documentary, probably wouldn't have the creature look at the camera. But according to Patterson, it looked back twice. I only see once on the film. I might have missed it. Sorry, I'm only human. I try my best. But like I said, a good person trying to make this look as natural as possible, example again, Stanley Kubrick, 2001, doesn't have his apes looking at the camera. They're looking at the monolith. They're looking at each other. They're looking at things on the ground. But they don't look into the camera. So Patterson and Gimlin, if they were trying to fake this thing, first of all, with $700 or $2,000 today, how did they get such a realistic suit made up? That would have been a very interesting negotiation to be part of if they did manage to get it. Secondly, how do they hire all these men, keep them quiet, take them on a trail, and suddenly they see this mysterious creature, or it's one of them that's done up, and nobody spilled the beans after all these years? Very peculiar. And like I said, the timing on this would just be impossible to pull off. They had to bring their own provisions with them. So this creature that met them exactly between 1:15 and 1:40 somehow is waiting there for them. Or they've set it up so that this person can go out and do it. The timing doesn't work. I don't know if any of you have worked on live theater or your local theater or anything like that, but timing anything at all in the world is a challenge. Try it with your regular life. You know, you book an appointment with somebody, you're going to meet for coffee, you're going to meet for a beer, whatever you're going to meet for, and things happen. Oh, stuck in traffic. Oh, I'm running behind because my kid didn't want to get on the bus. 10,000 things can happen. So to set up this meeting so precisely would be a greater achievement than the Apollo program. Not saying Apollo program is fake, by the way. I 100% believe that we went to the moon. But Patterson-Gimlin has to be the most controversial but the most convincing evidence for Bigfoot. Because for everything to go right, for this thing to be a natural production, is a 1 in a million shot. On the other hand, when you talk about practicality to fake the shot, it becomes even harder. Like I said, getting these men together, getting money together, getting a suit together, getting everybody to meet on the trail at the same time together, when you really have zero money to your name. Like, it's not like, again, Stanley Kubrick could have arranged it easily because he would have had 6 assistants, $1 million, and say, okay, Tuesday, 4 o'clock, I want 4 people to meet together, a black guy, an Indian guy, a firefighter, a policeman, and I want them to start singing. He could have done that. He didn't. I'm saying he did. He had the resources, he had the time, he had the money. Patterson-Gimlin did not. So, I'm going to use Occam's razor. When you're faced with 2 possibilities, you go with the one that's more simple. In my opinion, the coincidence is the simpler explanation than this convoluted plot for them to be able to magically summon money out of the air. And coincidences do happen. Make no mistake about it, coincidences are a huge thing in life. Ever bumped into somebody out of the blue one day? Maybe you haven't seen each other in 10, 20 years? Coincidence. Ever this shows my age. Ever poked your finger into the quarter return slot in a phone and got a couple quarters out? Yeah, that's lost to time, unfortunately. Although, speaking of cryptids, I do have a photograph of a telephone stand. Yes, it's not a booth, it's just a stand that's coming out of the wall, but there are still some of them out there. Try that for your next exercise. Don't go looking for Bigfoot. Don't go looking for UFOs. Try to find a payphone. That's a real challenge, and it would be about as difficult to find as the Loch Ness Monster would be. No, I'm sorry. Payphones actually exist. The Loch Ness Monster doesn't, in my opinion. Basically, the reason that we don't have so many encounters anymore, the reason we don't have so many encounters anymore is that we're all looking at our phones. That's not such a bad thing. Having our phones on keeps us connected to other people. It's just the fact that it keeps us disconnected from the world as a whole. A little story from my own life. I'll give you 2, and then I'll tell you a good joke to end this broadcast, and then we'll go from there. The first story I'll tell you was about 10 years ago, and I was camping up at Massasauga Provincial Park. You can go look at it. It's a water access only park. We'd had a difficult week camping. For some reason, nothing was going our way, and we did have fun, but at the same token, we were all tired, and we were on the way home. And my friend was driving, and all of a sudden he said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yes." My friend in the back said, "I just missed it, but I think I saw something." But we all looked, and there was nothing there. And we all sat down and were able to describe the person, an older gentleman, that was at the side of the road with his bags. And we all had the same image in our heads, but there was nobody there. Just last night, yesterday I put up, it's called a nature altar. And it's just some flowers, a couple little gifts to encourage nature spirits to come into your house. And I was going downstairs, and since I'm a nocturnal sort of person, I was coming down, and all of a sudden I could see a shadow figure. And it kind of looked at me, and it went the other way. I didn't get the sensation of evil that some people do with shadow figures, but it's curious that I set up my nature altar to Give some gifts of a little bit of liquor, a little bit of food, stuff like that. Because it's getting close to the Halloween season, and I always like to do things that honor tradition. Pretty strange I would see a shadow creature the exact same day. Again, it wasn't threatening, it wasn't interfering with me in any way. I think it was just saying thank you, hello, whatever it might be. Certainly gave me a start, and I'm not on any medications that would make me hallucinate, for the record. So yeah, that's a thing that's happened to me. So I'm used to seeing peculiar things, strange things that go bump in the middle of the night. That's why I have cats. Because if I hear it and they don't react, I know it's nothing to worry about it. But a lot of the times I hear strange things, my cats perk up too. And that's how I know whatever I heard is real. Now we're getting close to Halloween, and we talk about some serious stuff all the time here. So, it's time to lighten the mood just a touch. We're talking about cryptids. So, here's a little joke for you. It was back in the 1980s, and a young woman moved to New York. And she got her new apartment. She was excited. She was in the Big Apple, and she was going to make her fortune. Well, the first day comes and goes. Of course, there's the excitement of all your parents coming, your friends coming, everybody saying hello, all that sort of stuff. She finally gets them all out, sits down and starts unpacking, when suddenly there's a knock at the door. She's not expecting anybody. Everybody that she knows is gone. Maybe it's somebody who forgot something, their purse or something, so she opens the apartment door, and behind the apartment door, there's an old woman there, and she has hair just pure silver from age. But the most peculiar thing about her is she has these blood red lips and long fingernails, just daggers at the end of her fingers. And the old woman says, "Do you want to see what I can do with my red lips and my long nails?" Naturally, the young girl says, "No!" slams the door and locks it and says, "What the heck's going on here?" But she's in New York. There's some strange people. She says, nothing to worry about. Goes about the rest of her night uninterrupted. The next day, she's had a busy day out. She comes home, she's eating her dinner, and all of a sudden, same knock on the door. She knows she shouldn't, but she gets up, edges towards the door, opens it slowly, and there that old woman is again. Her hair is equally as gray as silver as it was before. If anything, her lips seem to be even bloodier, and her nails just ever so much more like daggers. And the old woman says, "Do you want to see what I can do with my red lips and my long nails?" "No," she says again, and slams the door. This goes on for a few days, and of course, sooner or later she gets tired of it. She sits there in her apartment, waiting. And sure enough, at the same time, that knock comes. She opens the door, holds her breath, and looks out. And there the old woman is, looking as pale as ever, looking fragile. And the old woman says, "Do you want to see what I can do with my red lips and my long nails?" The young woman sighs. She says, "Yes, just get it over with." The old woman takes her long nails, puts them up to her lip and goes, just to let you know, on the Silverlight show, we do have a sense of humor. We're getting towards the end of this broadcast, a bit of a shorter one, but hopefully no less rewarding. We wish to thank our sponsor once again, Affinity WES. You can look them up on Facebook or on Twitter. Again, please feel free to send me comments, feedback, whatever it is that you might have about the show. to silverlightservices@gmail.com. That's all one word, lowercase, silverlightservices@gmail.com. Halloween season is coming. It'll be an interesting one with the virus that's out there. I don't know what to advise you, honestly. I don't know whether to tell you to take your kids out or not. I chatted with a doctor, and he said that this is an overblown virus. At the same token, I can understand not wanting to go to a whole bunch of people's houses and get who knows what from them. It's not the pandemic situation per se, but we've all become more aware of cleanliness as a society. There's a reason I don't like to shake hands. And it's not because I think you're dirty, it's just because I don't know where your hands have been. And people are innocent. They sniff and they wipe their nose. Stuff like that happens. So I'm willing to shake hands. At the same token, I don't like it, and I tend to wash my hands right afterward. Unfortunately, going trick-or-treating, you don't know who or what's been in that house. I mean, ever gotten candy from a smoker? That's an experience. Ever gotten candy from somebody with a dog that doesn't beat it? That's an experience. But anyway, whatever you decide this year, whether you decide to celebrate Halloween and give out candy, because the kids do deserve a memory, this might not be the year to do it. That's a choice you have to make for yourself. We'll have one more show between now and Halloween, but I want you to start thinking about what you're doing this year. Are you celebrating? Are you getting some pumpkins out? Because whatever you choose to do, we will support you either way, because the Silverlight Show, above all, believes in choice. Thank you once again. Please send all questions and comments to silverlightservices@gmail.com. And one final announcement. Our new book, Frogs, will be coming out within the next couple weeks. I'll have a bigger announcement on it when it's closer to the time, because I'm in the middle of editing it, which might surprise some of you. But yes, I'm halfway through editing it, and it will be very good. Until then, thank you all for listening, and have a great day.